Hey, everybody out there in podcast land. It's Friday night. It is time for your latest episode of The Fortress of Rock. I am the Maestro, Kevin Crane. As always, very happy that you are joining me for some discussion of rock and roll. This is episode 105, taping on August the 18th, 2023. Of course, we start, as always, with our tribute to Freddie Mercury and Queen, segment 1, otherwise known as News of the World. Start off with some new music. Kind of breaking news happened here within the last 24 to 48 hours. Guns N' Roses has released a brand new song called Perhaps. You can listen to it on Spotify or your favorite streaming service. Now today, additional news broke that there will be another new song, the official B-side for the vinyl single of Perhaps, which is out in its physical form October the 26th. The B-side is a song called The General. And of course, a lot of these songs, just like when Van Halen put together a different kind of truth, and over half the songs on that album were based on demos and songs that the band had put together as they were forming, gestating, becoming the rock gods that they would eventually emerge as. Now, in this case, with Guns N' Roses, a lot of the new songs we've been hearing from them over the last few years originate from the Chinese Democracy sessions. And The General is no exception. If you read into some of the details, some of the stories that are floating around out there about this song, it is hard-rocking, grand, majestic. Sebastian Bach says he's heard earlier versions of it and absolutely loves it. So who am I to judge if Sebastian Bach thinks it's fantastic? So I will say this. I have listened to Perhaps one cursory listen earlier today, and that listen makes me want to hear The General, because I'm not sure Perhaps is the strongest song we've ever heard from Axl, Slash, and the boys. But again, vinyl version of Perhaps with the B-side of The General out October the 26th, Perhaps available on all your favorite streaming platforms. The General, who knows? When will that hit? Spotify, Pandora. Didn't get that kind of detail, but we do know that The General will be out no later than October 26th. The Cult going out on the road for a little tangent, a little offshoot tour from their current jaunt, supporting their latest album. But this new little tour where they're playing one show in LA and then about a dozen shows over in the UK is going to focus on their early years. So it is called the Death Cult Tour. Any of you out there who know the history of the Cult, of course, primarily Ian Astbury, Billy Duffy, of course, Matt Sorum was in the Cult for a while. They started out as the Southern Death Cult. So these shows, the one in LA and then the dozen overseas, will focus on songs from that era and the very, very early Cult albums. I believe the first two cult albums will be part of the focus. So if you live in LA, you're over in Britain, you want to do a deep dive into the cult's history, check out one of those shows. We know about the health scare Madonna had. Surprised it wasn't related to plastic surgery or silicone poisoning, but I digress. Madonna is rescheduling her postponed North American tour due to said health issues. She will be back out on the road December the 13th. Speaking of live shows and a conundrum, a problem that maybe possibly we're starting to see snowball. As ticket prices go up and up, the cost of going to a concert, not just the ticket, but if you want to have something to drink, if you want to have something to eat, even if it's outside the venue, just going to a regular restaurant now is expensive. Parking, travel time, if you're flying in or driving in from somewhere hours away. The last thing we need, the last thing you and I need, is to commit our money, our time, our energy to a concert and have the performer bail at the last possible second. I'm talking about you've already made the hotel reservations. You've already flew in, drove in. We're talking about right around the time the show is supposed to start, maybe an hour or two early. Still, that's a very, very late cancellation for people who have committed a lot of cash, a lot of their hard-earned money, a lot of their savings to setting up the travel and the accommodations needed to see the show. Does it shock me that one of these two Hall of Fame performers, yes, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame performers, it would be Bruce Springsteen? No, absolutely not. Because again, I know people who are diehard Bruce Springsteen fans, and I say all the time, he is snowing you. We're not talking about the music. Music, very, very good. And at times, on occasion, classic, phenomenal, historically good music. But I've pointed out over the past few years here on the Fortress instances, occasions where he shows blatant disregard for society, for his fans. Of course, the most recent example being the dynamic ticket pricing fiasco. And especially with those prices as they were going up and jumping up before people could even check out on Ticketmaster. In Philadelphia, he cancels 2 shows. Of course, the first at the very last minute for an undisclosed illness. Nobody's saying he wasn't sick. Nobody's saying that. But there has to be consideration given for the fans. We see this in sports all the time. We see it with teams that won't call a game when it's a downpour, like baseball. They have the fans travel out there, pay for parking, pay for concessions, sit around getting wet, soaked in the rain for 2 hours, and then they say, okay, game's postponed. You're not getting your money back. The ticket will still be good for the rain date, but nobody's giving you back the money you paid for the hot dogs, the beer, the sodas, the parking. Same goes for the concert cancellations. Now, when COVID hit, we saw a lot of this, but for the most part, because I personally experienced it with a handful of concerts, things were handled very well, very maturely. I still don't like the fact that Ticketmaster would tell you it takes up to 30 days to get a refund. So you've held on to my money for months and months when you first announced the concert and made us buy tickets, and then it's just too difficult for you after you've earned all the interest on my money to get me a refund within 7 days because you got to earn more interest on my money. What a scam. So Bruce Springsteen cancels at the last minute in Philadelphia, and Lionel Richie has a last minute cancellation. I believe it was in Boston or in the Boston area. Again, you already had people who had traveled there basically getting in their seats when Lionel Richie cancels the show. Postpones it, cancels. You guys know what I mean. I know it's semantics, but I know there's a big difference to canceling, you getting a refund, no questions asked. Again, it'll take time, but you'll get it. Postponed means, of course, you might get the option of asking for your money back on the ticket, but you can opt to keep it for the rescheduled date. The Lionel Richie, again, last minute cancellation because of travel issues from New York to Boston. Couldn't get the flight aligned properly. This is my understanding. I'm talking off the cuff here, so I'm pretty sure I've got the details right, but forgive me if I don't. I'll put that out there right now. But the thing is, anybody who lives in the Northeast, get a car service to drive you from New York to Boston. No, it's not the easiest drive in the world, but it's not really all that long, all things considered. Get a message out to the fans saying, I'm sorry, I'm delayed. We'll have to hold the show for an hour or so, but I'm on my way. But instead, Lionel Richie outright says, nope, done, not going to do it. With people in the venue, again, already spending their hard-earned money on overpriced food, overpriced beer. We've got to fix this system. We have got to fix this system. There are already enough inconveniences and irritations at a concert, sporting event. You guys know I love all of you out there, but some of you, you're absolute pains in the butt to deal with at concerts. Respect personal space. Don't get all liquored up to the point where you're never going to remember the show and you're going to ruin it for everybody around you. Just some helpful pointers, some helpful tips from the Maestro. And we'll actually come back, circle back around on this in the final segment, unfortunately in a bad way. The Talking Heads will reunite. They will get together at the Toronto International Film Festival on September the 11th for a Q&A, no performance, a Q&A for a screening here. This year's the 40th anniversary of the phenomenal concert movie Stop Making Sense. I saw that in a very small, dingy theater here locally, and boy, I'll tell you, it was a great experience, and it was a great, great movie. Now, in this day and age of convenience, I find it kind of ridiculous that you cannot get a hold of the DVD or the Blu-ray for Stop Making Sense. Hopefully, they will reissue a more moderately priced version after it plays in a limited re-release. But it is worth watching. Stop Making Sense is fantastic. I would recommend checking it out in the theater if you get a chance. Again, when they re-release it, limited, obviously. So hopefully in your city, you'll get a chance to watch the 40th anniversary of Stop Making Sense with the Talking Heads. Another movie coming out, Carlos, the Santana Journey global premiere. Yes, a documentary about Carlos Santana will be in theaters on September the 23rd, the 24th, and the 27th. I respect Carlos Santana. It's okay. I mean, when your biggest hit is basically partially attributed to, if not 75, 80% attributed to Rob Thomas of Matchbox 20, I'm just saying. Interesting little rock tidbit I dug up on ultimateclassicrock.com this past week. Now, I usually only like to focus on current events, but every once in a while you'll learn something. There'll be a new story. You'll hear about something in the past, in history, that a famous rock star did or said that you didn't know before. And that's the case here. Of course, Aerosmith is doing their farewell tour here in 2023. Chris Daughtry, yes, that Chris Daughtry of American Idol fame, went on to have a very successful career with his band, says that he was invited by Joe Perry of Aerosmith to tour as their lead singer in the early 2000s, when, of course, for the 475th time, Joe Perry and Steven Tyler were on the outs. And that, in and of itself, is extremely interesting, but there's more. Chris Daughtry was not the only singer that Joe Perry approached. This kind of sounds like a weird, eerie parallel to Van Halen after David Lee Roth left. We've heard the stories about Patti Smythe, Mitch Malloy, Daryl Hall. So Joe Perry not only approached Chris Daughtry, but supposedly reached out to Sammy Hagar, Lenny Kravitz, Paul Rogers, who seems like he would take the job in a second because he would just take any job he could get. Oh, Queen? Yep, I'll front them. The Firm? I'll front them. And then, most intriguing of the bunch, Chris Cornell. Now, of course, you got to look at the timing here. Soundgarden was broken up. Van Halen was broken up. So that's why names like Hagar and Cornell pop up in this early 2000s scenario. But very interesting. I did not know this until this week. Then finally, to wrap up news of the world, one unfortunate moment of silence to pass along. A&M Records, of course, an extremely important imprint, an extremely important label in the history of rock and roll, founded by Herb Alpert, of course, has passed away, but a very, very successful instrumentalist, Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass. But do you remember who the M in A&M was? Well, unfortunately, he has passed away here recently as well. That would be one Jerry Moss. So as we close out segment 1, we pay tribute to a very important, yet virtually unrecognizable to the common fan, influencer when it comes to the history of rock and roll. All right, so that's going to wrap up segment 1. You know, we're going to wrap things up in segment 4, where again, I have a special announcement, not the best special announcement in the world, but not the worst, not a disaster. Will impact our coming schedule here over the next few weeks. But we're not nearly ready to wrap it up yet. I should never have said that, because we've still got so much more to cover. Breakdown is next. Breakdown features my review of Godsmack and Stained at the Ruoff Music Center in Noblesville, Indiana, just outside of Indianapolis. The new Hives album, The Death of Randy Fitzsimmons, and the brand new song from Dokken, Fugitive. Good stuff coming in Breakdown. A quick, outdated promo break. I know. I'll get to it. Maybe this weekend. Again, an allusion to what's coming up, an announcement in segment 4. I'm the Maestro. Take a quick minute to jump in the bathroom, do what you got to do. I will be right back with Breakdown. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Fortress of Rock podcast with me, the Maestro, Kevin Crane. Of course, that was segment 1, The News of the World, our tribute to Freddie Mercury and Queen, where we look back at the past week in rock and roll and all the news and all the controversies that you deserve to know about. Next up is the heart of the show, the meat and potatoes, Breakdown, where we are going to review all the new songs, all the new albums, all the new concert tours, the shows that I've seen personally. Stay tuned for that. Of course, we're now available on Spotify, Anchor, Apple, Stitcher, Castbox, Google, Pocket Cast, and Radio Public, wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Hang out, kids. We'll be right back. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Fortress of Rock, segment 2. Here, taping August the 18th, 2023. This is episode 105, and it is the meat and potatoes, the heart of each and every week's episode. It's fine to live in the past, like we do in segment 3. It's fine to discuss the current in terms of news and notes and gossip and all that other tawdry stuff, but what we're really here for is to discuss the music itself. And that's what segment 2, Breakdown, is all about. Our tribute, of course, to Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. Yet another concert review for you. Godsmack and Stained at the Ruoff Music Center in Noblesville, Indiana, of course, with my wonderful golden ticket known as a lawn pass. This is a very odd review for me. Of course, we've discussed here over the past month or so Foreigner and Loverboy, Matchbox 20, Party Gras with Night Ranger and Jefferson Starship and Bret Michaels, bands that I'm intimately familiar with, bands that for the most part I like and I enjoy. Now, obviously, I went to this show because I thought I was going to enjoy at least part of it, and I did. I'm not going to a show because I'm like, oh, this band stinks. Let's go see them live. Have I done it before? Yeah, with free tickets. I've done it before. I've done it before with bands I wanted to see where the show ended up just being awful. But sometimes you have a confluence of events, things that just conspire to make your experience kind of awful. And that's part of what happened here with our Godsmack show this past Saturday, which would have been August the 12th. Now, first off, something that the Ruoff Music Center is starting to do here about halfway through the season is they're opening the gates earlier. And if you have a lawn pass, it's kind of sucking some of the fun out of it. Now we get early entry with the lawn pass, which is great. But now that they're basically giving you an hour and a half between gates opening and the start of the opening act, yes, I know it's a business. Yes, I know they're trying to get you to spend your hard-earned money on more food, more adult beverages. But again, all the appeal of the lawn pass starting to get sucked out by making us hang out for an hour and a half before we even get any music. Now, it gets worse for this particular show because it was raining. So they held the gates. Again, when you have a seat on the lawn, you're kind of stuck getting there as early as possible so you can get the nice sight line close enough where you feel like you're kind of gaming the system and you're getting as good a sight line or as nearly as good a sight line as the people that paid a lot more for a regular seat under the pavilion in the back rows. But this particular weekend did not work out well because of the rain. So we got rained on for the better part of an hour as they held the gates. And then we find out as we get to the venue, after just buying, my friends and I all went in and all bought those low-profile lawn chairs. Because I had, after 3 concerts, I said I've had it with sitting on a blanket on the rough, hard ground. My 58-year-old butt can't handle it. So we got these low-profile lawn chairs that would fit the standards of what the Ruoff Music Center calls for. And we get there and they say, this show, you do not get to bring blankets or lawn chairs in. Not even blankets. So you're just going to stand unless you want to sit on the bare ground for hour upon hour upon hour. Yes, I just mentioned, with gates opening earlier, you're standing for a good hour to an hour and a half before you get any music. And in this scenario, this near nightmare scenario, that's how it played out. And getting soaked to boot. So the night did not start off very well. Let's put it that way. Now, all the horror stories that we heard when we started asking around about why aren't they allowing blankets? Why aren't they allowing chairs? And people said the last time Godsmack played here. People were lighting the blankets on fire and throwing the chairs. So you know it had to be pretty bad if a venue would not rent out lawn chairs at $10 a pop for fear of injury, damage. So that's the setup for the Godsmack Stained scenario. So the opening act was not Stained. The opening act was Mix Master Mike. Supposedly has a connection with the Beastie Boys. I don't doubt it. So for half an hour, we get a DJ. Now, did he play some good rock songs and did he do some mildly interesting things with one or two of them? Yes, he did. But for the most part, it was a waste of my time. About halfway through, before he really started to get into a little bit more of the top quality hard rock and metal, 15 minutes into this, I'm thinking, this is a sign of the downfall, the apocalypse of our pop culture, if this guy is considered an icon. And I still feel that way, even though he got a little bit better in the last 15 minutes of his 30-minute set. Now, this part, the second part of the review, where we get into Stained, is me. It's all on me. I know there's a lot of people out there, a lot of people who love Stained, love Aaron Lewis. I am not counted as one of them. I've never liked Stained. I have never, ever, ever, ever liked Stained. And after seeing them live, nothing has changed. And Aaron Lewis is just a jerk. He comes off as one of the most unlikable people in rock and roll. Now, I've heard that some of his solo shows, he likes to spout politics. He didn't do that here. I'll give him credit for that. But he's like the equivalent in sports of Aaron Rodgers, where he thinks he's better than you. And you kind of look at him and listen to him and go, really? Really, dude? And they got to play for an hour and 15 minutes. So despite the fact that Godsmack was technically the headliner, it turned out, spoiler alert, that it was pretty much a co-headlining show. Stained, as I mentioned, gets an hour and 15 minutes. And Godsmack didn't play all that much longer than that in their set. But that's who I was there to see. I suffered through Mixmaster Mike. I suffered through Stained to see Godsmack. And the show that Godsmack put on was fine. It was solid. It was really good. But, and I got what I wanted. I got Voodoo. You get the dual drum solo. I know I'm going to butcher the name of this, but they do this. This is like a classic signature moment in all their shows. Batalla de los Tambores, where Sully Erna gets behind a drum kit and goes back and forth with the regular drummer for Godsmack. So, I got the highlights I wanted. But we took a calculated risk. We'd been rained on, forced to stand for hours on end. So we decided this time, unlike with the previous shows, especially Matchbox 20, we're not going to sit in the parking lot for an hour. We're going to leave a couple minutes early. Once the encore starts, we're going to head out and just gamble that we're not going to miss a lot. We'll miss a song or two, Probably some good stuff, but after the previous 3 weekends, we just decided with the lawn passes, they're already paid for, so these shows are basically gravy now. All they do is lower the average cost of each concert as you go to more and more. The set list was pretty good for Godsmack. I won't say great. Pretty good. They open with When Legends Rise. Then you get 1,000 Horsepower, Crying Like a Bitch, the spectacular, awesome song, opening track, new song off their latest album, Lighting Up the Sky, You and I, was the fourth song in. Loved it. Probably the highlight of the night, or one of the highlights of the night for me. Then they played Something Different. Just not a big fan of that song. What About Me? Again, not a huge fan. Then you get the bigger songs. Then you finally start getting the bigger songs. You get Awake, Surrender, the first single off Lighting Up the Sky, which is growing on me. So I'm not going to discount Surrender. That's a pretty solid song. Then we get my personal highlight, Voodoo, one of my favorite songs of all time. We get the drum solo after that, which I've already brought up and discussed. Then we get a long extended version of Whatever, where Sully Erna brought up a young fan and they kind of played around with the chorus and doing a sing-song and a chant back and forth with the crowd, go away. Now, this is about the time where we're planning our exit strategy. Because a friend of mine that I go to all these concerts with tells me he usually, at this point, when he gets into this little monologue, means that he's wrapping up the regular set. So after this long version, this long extended version of Whatever, they break into a cover of Highway to Hell. This is when we say, that's it. Let's go. Let's get out of here, save an hour of our lives. I know. I'm not a fan. It's bad form, but every once in a while, you gotta, if you're tired, if it's been a bad night, sometimes you gotta sacrifice a song or two and bail early. And in this case, we were very smart to do so because we left during Highway to Hell. They took a quick break, come back out for the encore, and we're in the parking lot and we can hear Under Your Scars, which of course is a very important song to Sulla Ernie because his foundation is based in and around this song. And he does a lot of wonderful, wonderful work with kids. And that's something that a lot of people probably don't know about Godsmack. It's what makes them one of the more admirable newer bands. I call them newer. I know they've been around for 2 decades, but it's why it's hard to say anything bad about Godsmack. And I'm not really trying to say anything bad about them here. From a pure music critic type standpoint, the set list was good but not great. And again, as I mentioned with Stained, Godsmack looks like what we could estimate based on what I got from setlist.fm. What they played after we left wasn't much. So I don't even know if they got to an hour and a half. Because I know when we left, right when they were wrapping up Highway to Hell, they were only an hour and 5 minutes in to their set. And they were heading off backstage to set up for the encore. So does this have something to do with the weather delay? They weren't close to curfew yet. Curfew's 11 o'clock in that area down in Noblesville. So I just wonder why some of these newer bands, again, I call them newer, even though they've been around for 2 decades, can't play longer sets like a Matchbox 20. Spoiler alert, happened to see some information about this weekend's Nickelback concert down at Noblesville at the Ruoff Music Center. They're only playing for an hour and a half. So if you want to go see Nickelback this weekend, you're going to have to sit through an hour of Brantley Gilbert and a half hour of, I believe his name is Josh Ross, before, and of course the breaks in between, before you get to an hour and a half of Nickelback. See, this is the pattern that bothers me. And I didn't expect this out of Godsmack, because when I saw them right before the pandemic, I believe it was the year before the pandemic, they put on a very solid, extensive show. Not like a Bruce Springsteen 3-hour extravaganza, but they gave you your money's worth. So here, wrapping this up, we're in the parking lot. We hear the first encore song, Under Your Scars. Then they play Bulletproof. Okay. I'm not a huge fan of that one. But then they close with I Stand Alone. Awesome song. So we really missed one awesome song. Yeah, that was it. 15 songs. That was the entire show. Done. Over. No Stay Away. No Bad Magic. So you can kind of see why I was a little disappointed in the set list and the length of the show, especially with what we had to go through, what we had to almost fight through to get to Godsmack. And again, I know people who like Stained wouldn't look at it that way. This is just me personally. So the little over an hour I got of Godsmack was great. Was it worth the entire night and the hassle? Probably not. And so stay tuned for Wrap It Up segment 4. I'll have some news for you kind of tied into this in terms of the hassles and the inconveniences of going to concerts and how it will impact the next few weeks here on the Fortress. But again, better situation. Probably would have enjoyed the show a little bit more. Still would never have liked Stain no matter what. No matter what the weather was. All right, we have what I'm thinking is the last big album review here for quite a while. At least a couple months here on the Fortress of Rock. And that would be the return, finally, the return of the Hives after a decade off. I love the Hives. I've seen them in concert, high energy, pop, punk, hard rock sensibilities, all meshed and melded and smashed together into one awesome band. The new one is The Death of Randy Fitzsimmons. Yeah, we've reviewed 3 singles so far off of The Death of Randy Fitzsimmons, but now it is time to go through 12 songs, track by track. First up, Bogus Operandi, of course, the lead single. It is also the lead-off track on the album. It is great. Typical Hives. And I will say that a lot here during the album review, because when I say typical Hives, that's a good thing. It's a good thing. Now, song 2, a little bit of a letdown, Trapdoor Solution. Barely a minute long. Seems like less than a fully formed song idea. I will say that if they had somehow been able to flesh it out a little bit more, could have been a pretty good song. But as it is, just a little idea nugget of a song that really doesn't add up to anything. Then tracks 3 and 4 are the second and third singles that were released, Countdown to Shutdown, which I absolutely love beyond belief, probably in the running for Song of the Year for 2023 for me here on the Fortress of Rock. That's how much I love Countdown to Shutdown. And then Rigor Mortis Radio, reviewed that here within the last week or two. Another awesome, catchy, typical Hives. Catchy, awesome, high energy. Now things kind of shift and change for me a little bit, as they do for the Hives in terms of style and tempo. And they do this. They are known to do this, where they will take a break from the typical Hive sound. I promise I'll stop saying that. But of course, the typical Hive sound is that high energy, frenetic, pop punk, borderline metal sound. Track 5 is Stick Up, which is kind of like almost a big band gangster type song. Not my favorite from them. Same can be said for track 6, Smoke and Mirrors. I've listened to this song probably 6 or 7 times, and I just can't get a really firm grasp on what it is. Track 7, things start to pick up a little bit with Crash Into the Weekend. It's kind of like they're putting the foot back on the accelerator, but doing it gradually. So Crash Into the Weekend isn't a full-on sonic assault, but you can feel the party vibe starting to gain traction and steam. Then we finally get fully back into it with track 8, Two Kinds of Trouble, where the Hives basically use this Two Kinds of Trouble hook in the song to basically say people stink. But it's awesome, and I love the song. Then, like Smoke and Mirrors, track 9, we get The Way the Story Goes, another song that's really hard to get a feel for. Now, this one's a little more of a mid-tempo song than Smoke and Mirrors, but still not quite a great Hive song. Then we get fully back into dancing, thrashing around with The Bomb. The Bomb is one of the top 2 or 3 songs on the album. It is fun. It is a party song par excellence. Then finally, after all these little tempo shifts and changes, experimental sounds that the Hives were playing with throughout the Death of Randy Fitzsimmons, we finally get one that works. And this is, again, kind of a pattern with the Hives. They can throw a slower song at you once an album that really sounds sincere, it's catchy, and it's cool, and it ends up being track 11. What Did I Ever Do to You? Nice little slow burn. Nice little steady level of simmering intensity. Very impressed with What Did I Ever Do to You? And then the album closes out with not quite the most bombastic rocker of all time, but it's still pretty good. Step Out of the Way closes out the Death of Randy Fitzsimmons. So glad to have the Hives back. While this is not my favorite album of theirs, I would have to defer, of course, probably to Veni Vidi Vicious. Tyrannosaurus Hives would probably be a close second. but I'm just so glad to have them back and sounding like after 10 years off, they haven't lost a step. Check out the new Hives album, The Death of Randy Fitzsimmons, wherever you stream your music, or, God forbid, you shell out $15 and buy the CD. All right, finally here on Breakdown, another welcome return. Dokken is back. Right now, the configuration of Dokken is Don Dokken and a bunch of guys who were never even close to being in the classic lineup. There is no George Lynch. There is no Jeff Pilson, of course. He is right now in Foreigner. And there is no Wild Mick Brown, who was the last one of the original lineup, the classic lineup, to stick around, but even he's gone now. But that's not to say that some of the guys in this current version of Dokken are not earning their keep and doing it well. The song, Fugitive, the first single off their upcoming album, Heaven Comes Down. Very, very solid start. The first single is maybe a little repetitive lyrically, maybe a little bit more downbeat than you would expect from Dokken, but the guitar work is fantastic. I will dare say that on this particular song, Fugitive, we're not missing George Lynch. Now, even though it's repetitive and a little downbeat, it is catchy. Yes, Don Dokken is not the strongest vocalist ever. He wasn't even when he was younger in their heyday in the 80s. But he's smart. He's savvy. He knows what he's doing, putting together songs, albums, band lineups. And again, the current lineup of Dokken does not embarrass themselves. They are solid. They are very good. Fugitive does what it should do. Fugitive makes you want more. Fugitive makes you look forward to the release of Heaven Comes Down. But we have come down to our limit here. The timer is about to expire on segment 2, but we're not nearly close to the end of episode 105 of the Fortress of Rock. Yes, the Rock and Roll DeLorean warming up in the garage, the drawbridge down, Doc Brown and I heading out into the time stream to discuss rock and roll history. Quick promo break. I Want to Go Back is next. All right, now that we've looked at the current state of music in our breakdown segment, it is time to climb into the DeLorean and travel back in time to look back at moments in rock and roll history, birthdays, deaths, anniversaries of song and album releases. It is time for I Want to Go Back, our tribute to Eddie Money. Stay tuned. And as always, we're on Spotify, Anchor, Apple, Stitcher, Castbox, Google, Pocket Cast, and Radio Public, anywhere where you listen to your favorite podcasts. All right, everybody, welcome back to segment 3, episode 105 of the Fortress of Rock. Dropping on August the 18th, 2023, I've got Doc Brown on a short leash here in the Rock and Roll DeLorean. As you know, it's busy time here for the Maestro with all these concerts. So we got to get into the time stream, drop some rock and roll knowledge on you from the past, get back so I can go see more live shows to review for you in the coming weeks. But first, of course, this is the part of each and every podcast episode where I have to take care of business. First up, the ideas for some of these stories, especially in segment 1 and segment 3. Here, I want to go back. Sometimes they're mine. Sometimes I have to go to outside sources. And the 3 most prominent outside sources I use: ultimateclassicrock.com, thisdayinmusic.com, and the mighty Van Halen News Desk. And of course, you're listening, so you found us somewhere. You have your favorite platform maybe, or you just stumbled upon us for the first time. You have options. Life should be all about options. You go where you want to go to find us. And I can tell you exactly where you can go. Not like that. Not like that. That didn't come out right. You can find the Fortress of Rock each and every Friday night, any day you want. Go back in the archives, listen to older episodes, listen to some old reviews. We are on Spotify, Google, Radio Public, Pocket Casts, Apple, Overcast, Castbox, Amazon Music, Audible, iHeartRadio, and for just about 10 more days, Stitcher. And of course, do not forget to check out the Facebook page, The Weekend Rock Project, in full effect right now. But I'm going to be a little sneaky here, going to keep it a secret. You guys need to get out to the Facebook page to find out this week what it is. Also, do not forget to check out New Music Sunday. Every Sunday, I post a link to a YouTube video of a brand new song, most likely something we've talked about in the breakdown segment or are going to talk about in the coming weeks. So don't forget to check out the Facebook page. All right, Doc Brown has given me that universal sign for speed it up. You're the one that was giving me a hard time because you're so busy with the concerts, Maestro. All right, August the 18th, let us start off with anniversaries. Going back to August the 18th of 1986, one of the classic albums of the entire decade. One of the classic albums from the hair metal genre. Bon Jovi's Slippery When Wet was released on this day in 1986. Of course, I have mixed feelings about Bon Jovi, especially because within the last couple years, I saw them in an absolutely awful concert. One of the worst, if not the worst, shows I have ever seen in my life. I tend to look at Bon Jovi as they float out there in an area where they don't really belong to any kind of group or genre. When I think of hair metal, I'm going Motley Crue, Rat, Quiet Riot. Bon Jovi was always a little too poppy and too pretty for that. They didn't have that edge. They really didn't have that edge. They had great songs. Of course they had great songs, but I don't think their songs have aged well, as opposed to the aforementioned, what I like to call the forefathers of hair metal. Now, you guys know I love my disco. You'll have to indulge me here because one of the greatest bands of the disco era, August the 18th, 1979, Chic. Of course, Nile Rodgers, the brains behind that, or the talent, whatever you want to say, however you want to phrase it. Nile Rodgers, of course, went on to become a phenomenal producer, session player, jack of all trades. But his band Chic, on this day in 1979, had the #1 U.S. single with These Are the Good Times. Yes, Good Times. Not the TV show, which was awesome as well, but the song, Chic's Good Times, #1 in the U.S. on this day in 1979. 1977, August the 18th. As a trio, the core trio that we came to know and love, the Police, made their live debut in Birmingham, England. Of course, that classic lineup. Yeah, there were a little bit of changes and shifts at the very beginning. But of course, we know the Police as Sting, Andy Summers, Stuart Copeland. August the 18th, 1966, The Doors sign a pretty extensive deal with Elektra Records. 7-album deal. Of course, the Doors deserve the accolades they get. Jim Morrison, one of my favorite singers of all time. And then finally, August the 18th, 1962, Ringo Starr makes his live debut with the Beatles. And again, just like with the Police as a trio, this was the first time live we heard, saw the classic quartet that many believe is the greatest band in rock and roll history. John, Paul, George, and yes, Ringo Starr. All right, let's move on to birthdays. Starting off with August the 18th of 1957. Ron Strikert of Men at Work. Of course, Men at Work there for a couple years were the hottest thing going. Had 2 albums, I believe, in the top 10 at the same time. The debut album, Business as Usual, and then, of course, Cargo. We'll discuss that a little bit more in just a minute. Now we move back to August the 18th, 1953. Of course, the Isley Brothers. Classic R&B and soul. Marvin Isley, born on this day in 1953. August the 18th, 1952. Life cut tragically short due to cancer. Starred in quite a few classic movies, of course, Dirty Dancing, Roadhouse. Yes, it's Patrick Swayze. Why is Patrick Swayze? Why is his birthday being mentioned on the Fortress of Rock? You know why. You know why. Because, like so many other actors and actresses who crossed over, either from the silver screen or the small screen to the Billboard charts or vice versa. Of course, that brings to mind somebody like Lady Gaga. Hollywood celebrities becoming rock or pop stars and vice versa. Patrick Swayze had the big top 10 hit, She's Like the Wind. I mentioned we are not done yet with Men at Work. Interesting. August the 18th, 1951. John Reese of Men at Work. Yes, 2 birthdays on the same day, not the same year, for 2 different members of Men at Work. And of course, as I mentioned, they were the hottest thing going for just a couple years. things burned out, flamed out very quickly for them, but they did a lot of damage to the charts in the short, brief time that they were big. Just saw this band in concert here recently, but of course, with the exception of a rare appearance from founder Mick Jones, there are no original members left in the band Foreigner. But the debut album from Foreigner was one of the first LPs I ever bought. And one of the members of the original lineup, born on this day, August the 18th, 1950. On drums, for Foreigner, Dennis Elliott. And then finally, as we get to the end of I Want to Go Back, of course, our tribute to the late, great Eddie Money, as you've pretty much been able to figure out by now, our look at anniversaries of classic album releases, birthdays, and moments in rock history. The final one we've got for you. Again, very underrated band. I would recommend going out on Pandora or Spotify, listening to the greatest hits for Split Enz. E-N-Z. Split Enz. Of course, the Finns were the leaders of this group. They have some really, really good songs. Again, you want to do a deep dive into their catalog, that's up to you, but definitely check out their greatest hits. Born on August the 18th, 1949, the bass player for Split Enz, Nigel Griggs, born on this day, again, in 1949. And all right, guys, that's going to do it for segment 3. And you know we're not done yet. We talked a lot in breakdown, concerts, new albums, the Hives, new songs, Dawkins. We were a little light on the news this week. Just happened to be a slow rock and roll news week. But now we head into the fourth and final segment where we will tell you what we're going to be discussing in the coming weeks. And I keep saying it over and over again. It's been crazy and hectic for the Maestro. But I love it. Concerts. We will tell you what concert reviews we will have coming up over the next 3 or 4 weeks. Now, in terms of new music, that's a little spotty. But we'll discuss that more after one last promo break. I'm the Maestro. I'll be right back. Well, we hope you enjoyed our trip back in time, looking back at the anniversaries, the classic moments in rock and roll history. But of course, the DeLorean works both ways. So now we have to move forward. The last segment here, as always, on the Fortress of Rock with me, the Maestro Kevin Crane. Spotify, Anchor, Apple, Stitcher, Castbox, Google, Pocket Casts, Radio Public, wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. It's all about the future. What's coming out here in the next month or two? What songs? What albums? What concert tours? That's why we call it Wrap It Up. Thanks to the fabulous Thunderbirds. Thanks to you for hanging out. Here comes our final segment. All right, everybody, it's about time to officially wrap it up. Again, I should never use that phrase, those words, earlier than this final segment. But I used them in segment 1. Did not mean to cause any confusion. Now, of course, Wrap It Up is where we take a few minutes here at the end of every episode of the Fortress of Rock to let you know what's coming up in the next 2 to 3 weeks, what you can look forward to. There has been an alteration in my schedule. I'm not a big fan of making excuses, and I'm not going to make excuses here. I promised I would tie this into segment 1 when I was talking specifically about the Bruce Springsteen and the Lionel Richie debacles. I think that's a fair word to use, where they were canceling out at the last minute, and all the money and all the time that the fans invest to get to the show, and then to have the performers bail at the last possible minute. Well, in this case, just to let you know, the way the taping schedule fell out, worked itself out. Of course, we're taping on August the 18th, Friday night. Last night was the Extreme and Living Color show that I've been talking about a lot over the last month, and I've been promising a review of that, and you are going to get that. It's not going to be this week. It'll be next week. Could I do it this week? I could, but here's the problem. You guys know I am in my late 50s. And I will never pretend to be a paragon of fitness, of health. I am not racked by disease. I am not suffering from anything chronic. But you get to my age and you start to wear down. It's just a fact. Nobody lives forever. And the music keeps us as young as it possibly can. But sometimes the magic of the music isn't enough. So basically what I'm getting to is this weekend, tomorrow, August the 19th, and Sunday, August the 20th, another set of concerts that I had promised you I was going to review. Saturday night, Nickelback, and then Sunday, the double bill of ZZ Top and Leonard Skinner. I just can't do it. While I was at the Extreme show last night, I could barely focus. I could barely keep my eyes open. A long week of work, other things going on. I am not at 58 able to do what I could at 28 or even 38, or dare I say 48. And it really hammered the point home to me last night, because I was looking forward to Extreme and Living Color so much. Living Color, of course, one of my top 10 bands of all time. Extreme, I love them, and I had never seen them in concert before. And I just couldn't enjoy the show because I was so damn tired. There's a certain zone you have to get into to really enjoy a concert. If you have gone to more than a couple dozen concerts in your life, you know what I'm talking about. There's a certain zone, a certain focus level, if you really and truly love rock and roll, that you need to be in to really enjoy a concert. That's, again, why I don't understand how people get all liquored up, toking and smoking. You're wasting the experience. Go home and drink. Go home and toke up. But when out of sheer fatigue because of work and life, I can't fully invest myself in a concert, that means it's time for me to pull back for just a week. For just a week. I'll be ready to rock and roll next Friday night for The Offspring. a bucket list band, just like Extreme was last night. But this weekend, I have seen Nickelback before. I have seen Skynyrd 3 times before. I've seen ZZ Top a couple times before. It's more important for me, for my health, for my physical and mental well-being, to not have to worry about standing, sitting, finding hotel rooms, eating overpriced food at Applebee's or Chili's. That's kind of where I'm tying back into the whole Bruce Springsteen, Lionel Richie situation, is that last night again, the concert was at a casino in Gary, Indiana. So you're kind of a captive audience in more ways than one. Because casinos are usually, at least here in the Midwest, built out in the middle of nowhere. So either you have to find a place to eat miles and miles and miles away from the venue, or you have to eat at the venue. So we ended up eating at the Hard Rock Casino in Gary, Indiana, and the food, of course, vastly overpriced. Not shocking, but still, it sucked. And of course, this part, I have no one to blame but myself, because again, 2 bands that I absolutely love had to get shirts. So by the time all is said and done, I've invested at the end of the night double what I paid for the ticket to see Extreme in living color in t-shirts and overpriced food. Now, of course, that doesn't just apply to this one particular show. The food, a little bit more pricey. And of course, nothing even close to gourmet level food. $20 mushroom Swiss hamburger is what I had. I know, you're saying, well, you could have figured something else. I know, but sometimes you just have to go with the flow. But again, looking ahead to this weekend, with one day of a semi-break, even though I had to work. And again, I'm not making excuses, but you can make choices in life. And I'm making a choice. I'm not going to spend $150 for a hotel room, 2 meals, Saturday, Sunday. Again, even places like Applebee's and Chili's are getting too expensive for what they give you. So in the grand scheme of things, balancing out the economic impact, these are, of course, shows. Here's the turning point, the thing that doesn't hurt me as much as it hurts other people. I didn't have to buy tickets for these shows. They're part of the lawn pass that I've been talking about all year that I got for the first time in 2023. So I'm not necessarily losing money. I look at it as I am saving money by not spending $250 to $300 for a weekend, which I really just don't want to do right now. And on top of that, I need sleep. I need to catch up on work around the house. There's your little insight into the Maestro's life. And it takes a lot for me to give up seeing a couple shows that I would really, really love to see. Now, if it was at The Offspring, I would push myself somehow to do it because I've never seen them. But because these are bands I've seen in the past, I'm bowing out. So you will not get my review of Nickelback live. You will not get my review of ZZ Top and Lynyrd Skynyrd live. So we'll adjust the schedule accordingly. So next week, August the 25th on episode 106, you will get my review of Living Color and Extreme. live at the Hard Rock Casino in Gary, Indiana. I know I've spoiled all of the ancillary stuff around the show. Next week, I will give you my review of the actual performances. Now, don't be scared off because of what I said about I couldn't quite get in the zone. I couldn't quite enjoy it as much as I would have normally. I still listened to every song, loved almost every song. But it's just, again, you want to be in your top mental and physical form and shape to enjoy a concert experience because it is a physical, a mental, and emotional experience. So I am taking a week off to get myself back in concert shape for the September 1st episode where I will review The Offspring, Sum 41, and Simple Plan live. And then, of course, about a month from now, Smashing Pumpkins, Interpol, and Rival Sons live. Now, in terms of new music, albums, songs, don't really have an album per se in the next few weeks on the agenda. I would imagine if we get an off week, which I see coming up in about 3 weeks, maybe we'll finally delve into that third and final act, that third and final disc of Autumn by the Smashing Pumpkins the week before I give you my live review of the band. But for now, we just got a handful of songs. Yes, I know, still with the Pretenders, still with Peter Gabriel, now still with Paul Rodgers, Take Love, I've still got that on the agenda. Alice Cooper, third single from his upcoming album. Welcome to the Show. Probably have that for you next week. I've already listened to that a couple times. Should be able to give you a solid review, a well-informed review next week of that song. And of course, we mentioned it in segment 1, Perhaps from Guns N' Roses. I would imagine that will also be on the agenda for next week as well, because as I mentioned, this review here, back in breakdown of the Hives, the Death of Randy Fitzsimmons is really the last gasp for now for new music. Of course, we've got Dokken coming up in a couple months. I'm sure there'll be another album or two announced for the pre-Christmas rush. So we will catch up on all this stuff eventually here, because got to have content to fill in the gaps. And I am working of, speaking about Dokken, I am working on, even though I just said I had to take a break from the concert going, November could be rocking with Dokken and the Bullet Boys, as they just announced a show at a venue here somewhat locally. So we might have a bonus concert review for you right before the weather turns awful here in northern Indiana. All right, I prattled on a lot, but I felt like I needed to explain here and wrap it up. The change, the alteration in the schedule, I apologize. I promised you Nickelback and I promised you ZZ Top and Leonard Skinner, but I just can't do it. 3 concerts in 4 days, juggling work, other responsibilities. I just can't do it. So unfortunately, Nickelback, ZZ Top, and Leonard Skinner will suffer. But you will not suffer I will always be here for you. I will always do my best to give you the best possible reviews and music news and discussions of music history, because it's fun and I love it. And I hope you guys do too. But for now, taking a 7-day break from the Fortress, because that's normal. As I mentioned, we'll be back on August 25th with my review of Extreme and Living Color live, along with Guns N' Roses' new song. Whatever happens in the world of music, I will report it, comment on it, and of course, we'll go back in time in the rock and roll DeLorean. But I hope you guys have a stellar, stellar weekend. Going to be very hot where I am. If you're on the West Coast, hope the tropical storm doesn't do too much damage. I hope you guys do okay out there. Yes, I know I disparage California a lot, but never would I wish physical ill will on anybody. Well, maybe Roger Waters. But beyond that, as always, I tell you to love the one you're with. And thanks as always for hanging out with me through the good times and this week a little bit of the bad times. But do not get discouraged. Do not be afraid. We will get through it together. I'm the Maestro, Kevin Crane. We will talk in 7 days. I'm out.